going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's the one and only Dog Waters, James Williams, and I'm back with another phenomenal interview. Now, for those of you who like to talk about the Bigfoots, the hairy men, the wild men, I have a good surprise for you. I have Hollyanna with me, and we are going to talk about her encounters. Now, in the pre-interview, she said, "I am a Bigfoot protector," and I got to get to the bottom of this. I want to know what she means by it. And without any further ado, Hollyanna, how are you today, my love? How's life treating you?
I'm doing really good. Really, really good.
I'm excited to have you on with me, and as everybody knows, I don't beat around the bush. Let's jump straight into the topic. All right, so you've had Bigfoot encounters. You've been around Bigfoot. What is Bigfoot? Because I've been looking for the answer to this question for a long time, and everybody's got a different answer. Based on your experience, what in the world are they?
For the Yakima people, I'm enrolled Yakima Indian. I'm located in South Central Washington State. We are a federally recognized tribe, and to our people, we believe that they are the protectors of all living things. So the trees, the water, all life that exists up in the mountains, they're the protector. And we believe that without that protector, everything that they care for will die.
Oh, wow. Now, that's my first time hearing that perspective. All right, so they're the protectors of every living thing. All right, talk to me
Correct.
about, I know that's traditionally the thought process of it. So, talk to me about some of the evidence that you have from your encounters that lend credibility to that idea that's been passed down by your people.
So anytime I come across anything, I destroy it. Whether it's prints, hair, what appears to be like a bed area, I hide it, I dismantle it, I erase any evidence I can find. So basically, I'm a researcher's nightmare.
You are anti-researcher, huh? You're covering up the tracks, huh?
Correct. Yep.
And why
And
why
that's
are
why
you
I came
doing
up
that
with
though?
the second. Because it's our job as Native people to protect all life. That includes living beings. That includes the air, the water, the trees, everything, the land, the air. You name it. That's our job to protect the environment.
Okay, so from I guess if I'm putting myself in a Sasquatch perspective or a Bigfoot perspective, and I took time to build a house and you tear it down, have you had any negative repercussions from doing anything like that, or have they been appreciative of that? How has that worked out for you?
I've never had a negative encounter because what I do before I do anything is I pray out loud and I let them know that um, they're in too close proximity of people who want to hurt them, or they don't have positive energy. They're looking to you know out Bigfoot basically. And so I let him know. I let them know. I talk out loud and say what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I've never had any negative encounters.
Well, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. You're not going. You're doing it from a protective standpoint. You're letting it be known that you're doing it from a standpoint of protection. So I'm based on what you're saying. I'm assuming the area that you live in is got to have a significant amount of people coming in to research in order for you to feel like they're being threatened, right? Have you had anybody come in that area armed, trying to hurt them or harm them?
I had one encounter where they were actually hunting Bigfoot. I mean, like literally with rifles, and they had all this equipment and everything. And so I didn't do any damage to the car. I just let air out of the tires so that they couldn't go any further because they were getting pretty close to an area that had a lot of activity. And I didn't want them in that area because I had overheard them when I was at the store earlier that they were going to go hunt him down, and they were thinking they were going to have a mega payday because they were going to bring a body home and whatever. And I was like, no, you can't do that.
Wow, that's crazy. And I I tell the people who I have this thing where I call where people go full retard, right? They say, "Oh, Dark Waters, you're lying about these locations." I always tell the people when I give them a location, I say, "Listen, first of all, you're not listening to me. I'm trying to tell you, you don't need to go here, but if you want to go, here's a location." And what you're talking about is one of the things I warn people about. I tell them, I say, "Hey, the people in these areas know that these beings exist, whether it be Dogman or it be Bigfoot, and in many cases." Those people have great understandings of the rules and regulations for encountering these things, and you want to go in there as a noob and start messing around. And I will tell them, hey man, some people don't appreciate that, and it's been quite a few people who, before they can get into a Dogman area, have ran into human beings who told them, I know why you're here, I know what you're doing, and you need to leave. And it sounds like you just so happen to be one of those people. So now let me ask you this very important question. What got you to the point to where you became,
I lost your audio. All I heard was you became.
I'm sorry, what got you to the point to where you became an active protector of these things? Was it an encounter that you had? Was it something like that?
Yeah, I've told the story before, and I never really spoke out loud about it until I ran into Mel Scahan, and he's a family member of mine, and he's very active in the Bigfoot world, and he's like, you need to tell people what you do. You need to tell people what you do, and I was like, I don't know, people are gonna think I'm crazy or whatever, but something happened a few years ago, and I finally started talking about what I do when I'm up in the mountains or when I'm out fishing or whatever I'm doing, gathering medicine. And so I told Mel about it. He's like, you got to tell this story. You got to tell the story. What happened first? And so I finally told him my first real encounter that I had as a child. I think I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I rode horses. I lived in the mountains. My uncle was one of those guys who did road construction, and they were building a brand new road, and they were trying to widen it out, and there was a lot of interaction we had up there, like rocks being thrown at the equipment, not at me, at the equipment. And where we camped at since I was a little kid, and so we brought my horse up, and so I was riding around up in the hills. My backyard was the mountains, and my front yard and everything. I lived in the mountains, and I was pretending to be I was racing horses. I was pretending to be an endurance racer, and I was trying to teach my horse how to jump over logs, and we got to a bigger log, and I thought, well, I think he's ready for this. So we turned around and we got some speed going, and then we went to go jump over a larger log than we had ever jumped over. And his hind feet, his hooves, kicked the log. And these bald-faced hornets came out of the log, and they were chasing me and my horse. And I was covering my face, trying not to get stung in the face. And I don't know how many times I got stung, but I eventually got knocked off my horse by a limb because I didn't see the limb, and I was knocked out. And when I came to, I could barely see, and I could just see blurs of the trees going by. And next thing I know, I'm lying or sitting in the truck, and then everything got quiet for a while, and I was just trying to breathe. That's all I was trying to do. I was just trying to breathe. Next thing I know, my uncle's in the car, and we're flying down the road, and we're trying to get to the nearest hospital, which was in Yakima, Washington. And for years and years and years, I kept trying to tell him, sing me that song that you sing. And what was that stuff you put on me? God, it stunk. And what the nurse had told me is that I was covered in mud and moss and leaves. And I was like, why did you do that to me? Why did you drown me in mud and moss and leaves? And he didn't say anything until I was 18. Then he finally told me, stop asking me about what your brother did. I didn't do it. It was your brother. I said, my brother wasn't even there. He goes, not that brother, your other brother. The one that's always throwing rocks at me. And I said, Bigfoot? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I didn't bring you to the truck. I didn't find you. You were in the truck when I got there, and you were covered in mud and moss and leaves. And I didn't sing you that song. You're old enough now that you should be able to understand this. It wasn't me. So my uncle is the one who told me that he believed that Bigfoot found me and put me in the truck and went and got his attention and was throwing huge boulders down into the road so that they quit for the day because some of the guys were really afraid of Bigfoot and they didn't want to be around. So they literally just drove off the scene and went home. And so the boss had no choice but to quit for the day. And so that's how my uncle ended up back at the camp and found me in the truck. And so that was the first encounter that I had. And as I got older, I kind of remembered a few things. I remembered other details that I hadn't remembered beforehand. And my uncle, when we got back up to the camp, there were still tracks on the ground. And he's like, our job is to protect all living beings. We only take what we need and we thank the creator for everything we have. And so he made me walk along with him carrying a tree limb, and we erased all his footsteps. And that's kind of where I learned to be a Bigfoot protector.
That is probably the most beautiful encounter I've ever heard. It really, really is. That is a beautiful encounter. I mean, I've heard a lot of Bigfoot encounters. That's a beautiful encounter. And I can understand now, growing up as a kid, experiencing something like that, why you would have the attitude that you would have towards them. That's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it really, really is.
Thank you.
Right. So we're at this point in time where, your uncle explains to you that, you needed to protect them, and it makes perfect sense that you would, and he would want to under those circumstances. Where did things go for you after that? What happened next?
So as you know, as a kid, I was a cross country skier, and I really wanted to try to go to the Olympics, and so I would train all the time. And so I was always driving as far as I could drive until the roads were closed, and then I would drive, or I would get out my skis and I would go skiing, and I would carry my Walkman with me. I'm aging myself here. Carry my Walkman with me, and I was getting hit in the head with snowballs, and it's like I became like, I don't know, like their little sister or something, because they were always teasing me, throwing pine cones at me in the summer. One year, my basket of huckleberries got taken out of the back of my truck, and there was footprints all over the place. And so I was like, "Oh, I guess you were hungry. All right, so can I at least have my basket back?" And it's just, I had crazy things happen to me from then on. You know, one time I went outside my camp where I was camped at, and my cooler was open and there was footprints all over the place, and he took my fish. I had trout in there I just caught, and he took all, or he or she, they took all my fish. I was like, well, you're welcome, but you could have left me one.
Right.
But yeah, I have a lot of crazy memories, of things that have happened to me, and or think like practical jokes that they play on me. Um, like where I live now, uh, I was gone for a ceremony, and my husband kind of got spooked a little bit because he swears that one of them was outside the house, like banging on the edge of the roof. And he was like, only one thing that tall, only one thing that tall. And I came home and he goes, tell your brother to leave me alone when you're not here.
Wow. Wow. That's I know if I was in his shoes, I'd have been like, no, I'm gonna go find you and tell you to come talk to your brother. He gonna have to chill out because he's losing his mind right now.
Yeah,
That's crazy. So let me ask you this question. You've had a lot of positive encounters. You already made it clear that you haven't had one negative encounter with these
right.
entities or these creatures whatsoever. And we know that they're there to protect nature according to your traditional beliefs. Why do you think that they show themselves to some people who are not, I would say, from the tribal nations? Why do you think they reveal themselves to other people as opposed to just, keeping it amongst family? Why do you think they end up showing themselves?
I don't think it's intentional. I think like a lot of wildlife, I mean, you always hear about cougars that are seen inside towns, or bears that are seen inside towns, or deer or elk. It's because their area is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and so basically they're forced relocated. And to them, this where the area where they get seen is their home. It's not really their fault that their home has been turned into a city or a town, or railroad tracks or a freeway go right through the middle of their home. That's, technically they were there first, but as society becomes more advanced and technology gets higher, it's they're at the disadvantage. And that's why I think they end up getting seen, is because, they're, I mean, how'd you feel if somebody moved into your home, and they didn't even ask you?
Right, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yes, they just tore down a bunch of trees and moved in right next door to you. You're like, yo, I'm living here, bro. What are you doing? That was my living room that you decided to tear down. No, I got you. I understand where you're coming from. Um, I think, and this is just my thoughts on it. When it comes to Sasquatch and Bigfoot, there's the sensationalism that affects the perception of these beings, and of course there's actual negative encounters that people have had. But I don't even hear people highlighting the good encounters. Like for example, that missing 411 came out, and immediately everything was attributed to Bigfoot or Dogman, or in that nature, right? Um, and I'm happy to be talking to you because I think there needs to be more people out there that talk about positive encounters. And I wanted to say this to you earlier, but I didn't want to cut you off. You were expressing concerns about people thinking you're crazy based on what you were going to say. And I want to assure you that there are people who think all of us are crazy. So you should not be concerned about that. You should go out and speak and tell what you know and share what you know. Because at the end of the day, if your job is to be a protector, the only true way to protect someone, as human or non human, is to educate them. So you sharing stories and encounters and giving understanding to people will protect both parties in the equation. You know what I'm saying? So, for
Yeah.
example, just some logical questions. What if you and I are in the woods, right? And we experience rock throwing. How should I interpret rock throwing or pine cone throwing thrown at me? Now, I know how you would interpret it because you've been around them. Let's say you walk off and I'm left at the truck and you ran off to go do something. Let's say you out catching trout and they start throwing pine cones and rocks at me. How should I interpret that as an individual who's like new to the woods and is not familiar with it? How should I interpret that behavior?
One of the things that I always do when I go into the woods is the very first place I stop, I offer up a prayer and water and tobacco, and I let the creatures, our brothers and sisters, the animals and the winged ones and the plants. I let them know what I'm there for, and I explain. I've been taught only take what I need, and that's all I'm going to do. And I tell them that what are my intentions for being there? Why am I there? And so I've never had a negative experience in the woods at all. And that's, I think people don't understand that there's a part of us that has been lost over the generations, and that native people still practice, is letting people know what you're doing, why you're there, what are you doing there, that you aren't there to destroy or deface trees or rocks or whatever. And there's been a lost sense of respect for nature.
All right, so and I don't want to put words in your mouth. So, what I'm getting from what you're saying is, if I find myself, because I'm not about to offer no tobacco or nothing like that, I can tell you that. But what I can say is, what you're saying is, if I'm there and I feel like I'm being threatened, then I need to communicate and say that, hey, this is what I'm here for. I'm not here to bother you. I'm not here to harm you. I'm passing through. I should verbally communicate, is what you're saying, right?
Correct. Just like the people who are missing a few screws who have been to Yellowstone and have been attacked by buffalo. They're wild animals. They're not cats or dogs. And even cats and dogs can be pretty vicious if they want to. But I'm saying they're not domesticated animals. And so that's your own fault that you get gored by a buffalo, as far as I'm concerned. And so that's the same way with all animals. They're wild. They're not domesticated pets. They're being themselves, and you're in their area. You have to show respect. And you know, I don't know. It's just sometimes the things I hear about people and the things they do with animals, I'm like, it surprised you got hurt or injured.
I know, I'm with you. I'm with you. And so, what would be outside of verbally communicating? I'm here for this. What do they view as signs of respect? Because I'm telling you, people don't know these things. I talk to hunters and fishermen who have these encounters all the time, and they don't know and understand because it's not like a spoken language. If I come into an area where there's a Bigfoot, I don't know what it views as a sign of respect. I know everybody at this point. I've been communicating to them. Hey, if you find yourself in an area, put your hands up, show your palms, say, "Hey, I'm just here. I'm leaving." Blah 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 to verbally communicate. But outside of that, what do they see from their perspective? You had encounters with them. What do you see as? What do they interpret as respect?
Body language, um, food offerings, not destroying what they're supposed to be protecting. So, I hear a lot of stories about like loggers and road construction and people who are basically just vandalizing the forest. They're the ones that I hear that have all these negative encounters or get scared or get freaked out. But then you have these other people who like hike in the woods, and they're just hiking. They're not, because I know of quite a few hikers and who are non-native, and their practices, we pack out what we pack in, and I was like, that's perfect. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't leave it worse than you found it. You leave it better than what was there before you got there. And most of those people that I talk to that are non-native, they aren't out there hunting. They aren't out there trying to find evidence. I do know some researchers and some who are native researchers, and but the way they go about it is they're not destroying things in their pathway. They're just looking for the evidence, and that's all they take. And to me, that's respectful because they're not destroying anything. They're not hunting anything. And I think body language is a big thing. That's one thing we all understand. We understand when a dog hunches its back and it shows us its teeth, it's not happy. And so I think they can also interpret our body movements. And so I can understand why people are saying they put their hands in the air, they show their palms, because you're showing that you're not there and you're not being aggressive.
No, yeah, that's definitely a way of showing that you're, being non-combative. You touched on native investigators. I would love to know, and I don't know if that's something that you can share. I know you've spoken to them. When you compare, first of all, let's start here. Let's take out the hunters altogether. Somebody who's going in the woods with a rifle to take a head of like a Bigfoot as a prize. Let's just take them out of the equation completely. We're not talking about them, all right? Let's take
Okay.
your typical field researcher who wants to go out into the woods and find evidence, and their techniques versus a native investigator. Um, what kind of variations and techniques tend to cause a problem? Because I'm pretty sure a native investigator who has, I mean, extreme knowledge of territory, terrain, and also a unique understanding of these beings, they're definitely going to be over the target, right? If and there's a lot of investigators that listen to me. If you were to tell an investigator who's a field investigator that's not like trying to kill or hurt or hunt, if you were to share something with them to keep them out of trouble, what would it be? Now, I don't want you to share too much because there might be some jack behind out here that wants to go with a rifle. So we ain't gonna share too much. Don't go too deep. Just one thing that would help them. Because I understand your objective is to protect. So I don't want you to give nothing that's too deep because somebody else might take it and use it the wrong way. But just one thing that would help a regular field investigator who's not that has no malicious intent, not trying to harm anything. That guy's like, man, I just want to know these things are real. What would be something that would be transfer over that they could use?
The only thing I can really think is, and I'm a person, I'm a math science person, so I understand research. My thing is, what are you going to do with that research, and why do you have to have it? I mean, to me, I think, you know, why do we need to know everything? There are there is no happier sensation than to know you discovered something. But isn't it kind of cool to not know everything? Isn't it kind of cool to have surprises and, you know that you are just a small speck on the planet and in the universe, and we're never going to know everything. So why not leave some things that you just know in your heart are real, but you don't have to prove it to nobody? And I think there's more prize in that than there is, because when you die, you don't get to take the money with you. You don't get to take anything with you. And but having that feeling of something, I think that's more valuable than anything.
Yeah, I'm with you, but you also have to realize you're talking from a perspective of a native person who's grown up in a
Right.
culture where you know these things exist. Like you know without a doubt that this exists. But for a moment, let's take you out of those shoes. Let's drop you in the shoes of a person who's been hunting their whole life, right? Never had a negative encounter in the woods. Go in the woods. They're only taking what they need to eat. They're not out there just killing stuff and letting it die and leaving it there. They're taking what they need to eat. They take it home to their family. They have an encounter, right? But they don't have that knowledge that you have. They don't have that cultural knowledge that you have. So when you look at it from that perspective, that person experiences something and it provokes fear. And granted, the Bigfoot might not even be trying to provoke fear, but the simple fact that there's something huge and hairy in the woods, that's signaling or throwing rocks or snapping limbs, that's going to invoke fear. Now, there's two responses to that, right? One person says, I'm never going in the woods again. The other person says, I want to confront this and get over the fear. Here's what I know, Holly. I know that a lot of times the people who end up going back into those woods and have become researchers is because it starts off because they're facing that fear again, and then it evolves to, okay, I want to capture evidence, and then in the extreme, the very very extreme case, it gets to, oh, I'm going to kill one of these things. But there's these dividing lines that happen. It's, I need to go confront this fear, so I'm going to go back. And then most people just go back and they go back to hunting and they don't have another encounter, but they're aware of it, right? Then that some people, they go from, I had this encounter and now I'm at a point to where I want to know what's going on. So when I was asking you to address that, I was asking you to address the people who want to know what's going on, but you got to step outside of yourself to do that. You kind of get what I'm saying?
Kinda. Um, and that's really hard to do if you grew up my way. But
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to do because your mindset is a protection mindset. But I'll say this to you: the best way to protect something or someone is to educate people on what to do and what not to do. If you tell them what not to do, then human beings, in this field, the people in this field are very very smart. The people listen to this interview. There's no doubt as to whether or not the phenomena is real. They know it's real. The problem is what not to do to get yourself in trouble, because human beings are gonna go into the woods. We've been doing it for centuries, right? So the
right.
real issue is, what do you do What do you what are the do's and don'ts that keep you out of trouble with these entities? And it's protection on both ends. And that's what I'm trying to get you to give me a few tips for people, things that they
Okay.
definitely shouldn't do. And for researchers,
If
particularly, some of the things they shouldn't do.
Yeah, I definitely know one thing that would save their hide is if you, and I know it's hard for people if you haven't seen one before to know whether you are looking at an older one or a younger one. But if you think you are looking at a smaller version of what everybody's told you is an adult version, you definitely need to get out of there because you're with a younger Bigfoot. And we all know you don't mess with people's kids. And I think that goes across the board for, I mean, look what happens if you mess with a bear cub. You get the mama bear.
Right.
And I think every species is the same way. And I certainly know if anybody ever messed with my kids, I'd be turned into a grizzly bear version of myself. And so I would say if you think you're looking at a lot smaller or shorter version of a Bigfoot than you imagine what people have described to you, you need to get out of there and fast.
Nah, that makes perfect sense. That makes all the sense in the world. Um, there's been hundreds of hunters that I've spoken to who've seen. Well, they haven't even seen the smaller version. They've seen smaller prints that didn't make sense, and they decided to follow those prints just out of curiosity. And then it was almost as if they walked. They described it, and maybe you can help me with this. They described it as they walked through a wall of air. You know how you're out in the woods and there's these cold
Yeah,
spots?
yeah. Uh-huh.
It's like they walked from a warm spot through a cold spot, and but it was warm on the other side. But it was just I don't know what that is. What is that? But it's like they walked through that, and then as soon as they got through that kind of cold spot in the woods, and the temperature went back to normal on the other side, it was like bam, everything went crazy. I'm not sure what that is. People, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can give me some insight into it. You sound like you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I've experienced that before, and usually when I find those areas, I just turn around and I leave because I just it's that gut instinct in my stomach, in my heart, in the back of my head that says, "Nope, this is not an area for you to go." And I just turn around and I leave. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I've experienced that several times up in the woods. And when I talked to one of my uncles about where I was at, he goes, "You're supposed to stay out of there. That's ancient village grounds. You can't go in there." I'm like, all right, no problem, no problem. I just didn't, that the first time I experienced it, I was like, I didn't know what that was. It was like I was in a whole different season or something. Like I went from fall to dead of winter.
Hmm.
And he goes, "Yep, that's ancient grounds. You don't go there." And so I stay out of those areas.
And it would make sense. So basically, see, you just gave me a great insight to a couple of encounters. So it makes sense that maybe they have permission to go on those ancient grounds, or maybe that those ancient grounds are refuges for them, and so that's where they
Yeah.
go. And then we as humans, because there was very very aggressive activity once those guys crossed that kind of, I called it an air barrier. Once they crossed that barrier, it was extremely aggressive activity. Now it stopped the minute they went back where they came from. It was like they were actually herded out of there. They weren't run out of there. They were herded like from all different sides, like being pushed directly out. You didn't have a chance to go left. You didn't have a chance to go right. The only decision you could make was to go back, and that's what they encountered and experienced. And so that makes sense. That makes sense. So if someone comes across one of those cold spots in the woods and it's like a barrier of cold air, then they need to know they've stepped on some kind of sacred ground. That makes a lot of sense. That's terrifying. That makes me not want to go in the woods at all, especially down here. Because I experienced that when I was a kid, Holly. Um, there was these woods that were in my neighborhood, and we would go and build like tree houses in the woods. But it was weird because there were times when that barrier was there, and there were other times that it wasn't there. And we would all comment on it. We even built a skateboard ramp back in those woods, right? And I remember there were times when it seemed like it was there, and we would go skating, We had skateboard ramp, and it wasn't really a fancy ramp, but it was a ramp. You know, we would ride up, go back down, and then it would seem like the woods were watching us on those days where that barrier was there. Then the other days, you can go in there and it feel like nothing was going on, nothing at all. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you can give me some insight into that. You think it moves? You think it's a part of their presence, or you think it's a multifaceted thing?
I think it's multifaceted, because we as Native people believe that not only do we have spirits, animals have spirits, but we also believe that all living things have a spirit to them, like a power to them, especially trees. And just like good spirits, there are bad spirits. And so, who knows? I don't know much about bad medicine other than I stay away from it. Um, just like bad people, you get that vibe off of them, and it's kind of like it pushes you away. So, I don't know if that area is good or bad. I just know I stay out of there because I can feel it. And so I think it's multifaceted. I think there's more than just like ancient grounds there. I think maybe it's, whatever's in that area.
No, that makes sense. And the smartest thing to do is just say, okay, I'm not sure what in the world is going on, but I'm leaving. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting the hell out of
Yep.
here right now. That makes more sense. I'm with you. I'm with you on that approach. It don't matter. This feels weird. I definitely walked through a
It,
barrier of air, and I'm leaving. That's the smartest
yeah,
thing to
because it's
do.
not right.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
right.
it's
And
something's wrong.
yeah, I mean, pure and utter common sense is what will save the day in that situation. Let me ask you
Exactly.
some off the wall questions, just
Sure.
from a native perspective. There's just been this talk, and it became real popular about this thing that people are calling the rake, and it's supposed to be like this humanoid thing that walks on its with its belly up in the air. And then I've heard people talk about, the rake has to do with native legends. Is there any truth to that? From what you've grown up understanding and hearing, to the rake having a direct correlation to, Native American legends and lore.
It like a monster or something.
Yeah, see, don't worry about it. If you don't even know what I'm talking about, then there ain't no truth to it. It's like a humanoid monster that basically goes on all fours. But imagine if you and I were crab walking. You know, I used to crab walk when you were a kid, and you would crab walk backwards.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
supposed to be a version of a humanoid thing that's 7 feet long, 6 feet long, that crab walks. But I've talked to people who told me, well, that comes from Native American legends with the skinwalkers and this and that. And I'm like, yo, that don't make no sense. I've heard about the whole skinwalker thing, and that's verifiable. But this rake thing that everybody's talking about, I've yet to talk to anybody that has native blood that talked about the rake. They talked about the little people. I'm not gonna mention the real name of the little people because that's not. I'm not saying that, but they've talked about that. But this rake thing, I'm just trying to figure out if you've heard anything about it growing up.
Well, from what you're describing, I have heard um, stories because I went on the Powwow Trail one year, and so I went all over the United States to different powwows. And when I was down south, I had heard some natives talking about this, like it's like how like people have dogs for pets.
Yeah.
I heard them talking about this witch who was like a negative, like a bad witch, a bad medicine witch
Hmm.
that had like a companion who was actually supposed to be like a disfigured human that walked on all fours. And so that kind of sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like it. Yep, that might be what we're talking about here. Wow. Okay, that's
But
pretty
that was
spooky.
down south, and every tribe is different. There's over 500 different tribes in the United States, let alone in Canada. But I have heard a story about that, and they were like, if you ever see that, you turn around and you go the opposite way. And I'm like, no problem.
Now
Yeah.
that's pretty terrifying because I was I was thinking, I wanted to ask you that question. I always ask anybody who and normally these conversations happen in private because, and I appreciate you even speaking publicly because a lot of the natives that I've talked to, they don't want to be interviewed. They'll talk to me and they'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but it won't be an interview. So I appreciate you even touching on it, because it's you guys' communities are very, very hush hush when it comes to these things. And the more time I spend talking to people, I realize why you guys are hush hush. It's important to be hush hush because there are people out there who will cause problems and they will actually get themselves into trouble that I don't think they can get back out of, Um, and
Well, there's some people who believe that if you talk about it, you are basically inviting that into your life. I'm a little more open because in our people, I'm a traditional leader, and I basically you could call me like a medicine person. I don't call myself that. I'm the medicine chose me. I didn't chose it. When I was a kid, I said I never wanted to do this because I saw how hard they had to work and the standards that they were held to and everything. And I didn't want this job, but it chose me, and so I didn't fight it. But there are some things, and it's kind of like this conversation that Mel and I had a few years ago, which you almost quoted Mel, that if we don't educate people, that's when they get into trouble. And I believe that because I'm a teacher. I teach language. And I know if I don't tell people, and if you don't talk about the difficult conversations sometimes, or talk about things like me being a Bigfoot protector, then my frustration with people is my own fault because I'm not doing anything to prevent it.
no, I agree with you. Communication is key. I mean, it is the most important thing to communicate the knowledge that you have, because I'm telling you, I've spoken to countless witnesses that if there was just a little bit of knowledge, and I don't have I consider myself to have knowledge on these topics, but I don't have the in depth knowledge that you guys have. Um, but if they had just a little bit of knowledge to make the right decision, things wouldn't have went the way they went. But I deal with them on the back end. I get that phone call after they've encountered a dog man, and after they've shot at it, and after they've done something like just try to roll over it with a car because they were afraid. And then by that point in time, they done pissed it off. In the case of Sasquatch, the last guy
Yep.
that I talked to, he had Sasquatch on his property, and it was looking through his window, and he freaked out, ran outside, and just started shooting into the woods. And the next thing you know, he had beating on his roof. Not something on his roof. It was so big and so tall that it was beating on the top of his roof to the point where he had
Hmm.
dents on his roof, like the plywood was dented in. And it was like,
Yep.
you know how you ball your fist to make a hammer? That's what he saw
Hmm.
on the top. And he was like, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, the first thing you shouldn't have did, you shouldn't have shot at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real, it was looking through the window. I know it freaked you out, but bro, you had to realize that shooting at something like that might make it angry, right? Well, I didn't care because
Hmm.
it was looking through my window. Bro, okay, let me ask you a question. If the Incredible Hulk was outside your window looking in, would you shoot at the Incredible Hulk? No. Okay. Thank you. Why did you just do that? And people need to understand those things. But that fear
Yep.
takes over them and they make bad decisions. So it's good that you're
Yep.
out talking. I want to encourage you to keep talking. I know you're going to get a little flack from people who call you crazy. They're going to do their things. And this community is really rough. But stand your ground, hold to your guns, let them take their shots, and keep on doing what you're doing, because I'm telling you, it's going to help a lot of people. Right now, we're seeing an increase in activity where people are seeing Bigfoot, Dogman, all kind of other things. I don't know what's going on, but it's crazy right now. And so you being
Oh, I
out
know.
talking is going to help.
Yeah. Like it was mid-May, I think it was, but I have not seen so much activity. But this year, for some reason, and I'm not just talking about my brother. I'm talking about just things that happen that you just kind of go, what is going on? So mid-May, I'm driving home, and there was 5 lights in the sky, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And I was like, and I haven't seen so many lights in the valley except for this year. And I don't know why all of a sudden they're coming back. And but then I went fasting up in the mountains by myself to prepare for a ceremony that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And I'm up there by myself, and I had multiple brothers around me while I was up there praying and singing, and I was talking to my aunt about it. And she goes, well, you have an affinity with them because they saved you, so they probably think you're one of them, or they call you one of them. And so they're there protecting you to make sure nobody bothers you while you're fasting, that the animals don't get mad at you and say, hey, that's my spot where I sit or whatever, because the ceremony is no food and water for 3 days, 3 nights and 3 days. And the whole time I'm up there, I had all kinds of animals going around me, going around me, going around me. But every day I would wake up, and I slept in the back of my truck in the pickup bed. And every morning I woke up, there was footprints around my truck, all around through my camp. And I was just like, I have not seen this much activity in a long time. They must miss me, because after I got COVID, I got really sick. So I hadn't gone to the mountains in 3 years because I could barely, do anything. I could barely function. But when I went back up there, they must have missed me, because there was all kinds of footprints around and all kinds of, places where I think they sat. So it's just crazy.
Nah, it is crazy. Holly and Anna, darling, we're running out of time. Here's what I want to do for the last couple of minutes of this interview. I want you to tell people how they can find you. Be real specific. If it's a Facebook group, give the name. If it's Instagram, give the name. So people know where they can find you, so they can contact you. We have a huge audience, and I really enjoyed talking to you because it's a perspective that people need to hear. And I want to help you get that perspective out. So tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook under my name. You can find me on Instagram by my native name, which is Cougar Tracks the Prey. And on Twitter, it's just H Littlebull. But yeah, you can reach out to me there if you want. And that's me. I'm just Hollyanna Cougar Tracks Dakota Littlebull.
All right, that sounds good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dark Waters, and this has been another phenomenal interview. In fact, this has been one of my favorite interviews that I've done recently because it gives a different perspective on Bigfoot. You guys heard the last one with Toby and Brett, and they were out doing investigations, and they had a whole bunch of eyewitness encounters. But Hollyanna has given us a different perspective, and that's what we want. We want to hear all angles, all sides, and so we can get information out there. With that being said, you guys have a wonderful day. I'll be back soon.